All right, here we are in Davinci Resolve. I've already imported a clip that I want to color grade, and then I've set up the node structure similar to how they recommend it. First one would be noise. I'll show you my noise settings right here. I'm going to turn that off just so it doesn't hog any resources, but you can see here I've got frames 3, faster, medium, luma 7, chroma 7, motion 50, blend 0, and then spatial noise reduction, faster, small. And so those are my noise settings. I'm going to turn those off. Now I've gone ahead and I've already done a white balance. So I'm going to turn that on, and then you won't really see that take effect until I turn on the color space transform. So I've dropped that onto that node there. So you want to do these things prior to using Dehancer. Also, if you want to put any mask, you would do that again prior to Dehancer. So let's have a look at some of these transformations I've made. So again here, I've got the white balance off. I've got my color space transform. Now I'll go through my project settings as well. So we go File, Project Settings, and then I have this set up like this. So I have DaVinci YRGB Color Managed, Color Processing Mode Custom. Then I have my input color space, which is the footage that I shot, Panasonic V Gamut, Panasonic Vlog. I shot this on the Panasonic GH5. For the timeline color space, I have DaVinci Y Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate. Then I'm color grading on a LG, so I can look at my Mac plus my LG monitor. So I've got it set up for HDR 500 so I can better see the highlights. And then I have my output color space at Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, limit output gamma to output color space. And if you're doing any HDR grading, then you can just check these boxes, but if you're not, don't worry about it. So those are my project settings right there. I'm not going to make any changes to them. I just want to show you them. So I've made my color space transform. For that, I have input color space, Panasonic V Gamut, input gamma, Panasonic Vlog, and then our output color space is going to be Rec 709, Gamma 2.4. So these things are done prior to Dehancer. For tone mapping, I have none. Gamut mapping, I have none. And so I've played around with these settings, and these look the best to me. So once you've got your noise, which I showed you, then you're going to do your white balance or any little color grading. So I'll just show you that. So I click on that, and we'll look at the HDR tab. One tip I can give you is if you go over here, you can set the color space of your HDR tab. So we've got that set for Rec 709 right here, you can see, and we have our gamma for 2.4. So I've set that, and then I've made some adjustments. Tweak the global exposure. Here we are using the waveform monitor. And then I reduced the shadows, the darks, the blacks. I just made some slight tweaks really to anything else. Not much really. I upped the saturation to about 130. And then this tab here, we'll toggle that on, and that's contrast, and I put that at 1.030. All right, so those are all the settings that I did prior. I was happy with my white balance, so I didn't re-white balance. Like I said, I'm going to keep the noise off so it doesn't hog any resources. And now we're going to get into Dehancer. All right, so we're in a good spot. Enable this node. And then the last node, if you felt like you needed to add some sharpening, you can. I'm not going to bother, but I just put that there so you could see it. Now I'm going to go to Dehancer. A couple ways you can do it. You can scroll all the way down to the bottom, or you could just go up here in the search and then just type Dehancer, and then you'll see it. For this video, it's Dehancer Pro 6.2.0. That's the version I'm using, and we'll just drop it over there. All right, it worked that time so you can see. So right now, by default, everything is full on. So we're going to turn some things off, and then we're going to build this up from here. Now you can see our source is Rec 709, so that was the output of the color space transform. So Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. Alternatively, you can also choose your camera. If you want to do it that way, you would just go up and then you would change things from there. You could just go vendor and you could choose your camera, but I'm going to do it this way. I've experimented and I got myself in a good spot. Now this is just sort of the icing on the cake with Dehancer. So what we want to do is we want to disable some of these. And so what we'll do is we'll just sort of do one at a time, and then we'll build it up from there. So we've got expand. So you just scroll down, just click off enabled. And then what we'll do is we'll build this up step by step, and I'll walk you through that process. So just want to make sure that we've disabled anything that's enabled. Also too, at the end, if you feel like it's a little too much, you've got some things here. Oh, this is one thing I want to mention. Putting on your clipping indicator, that'll show you if your highlights are clipping or the darks are clipping. So you want to do that as well. And then your total impact. So let's say you get it looking pretty good and you still think it's too much, you can lower the overall impact of the plugin. So we'll get to that at the very end. And then you can see we've got a LUT generator. We're not going to worry about that. Let's go up to the top. So right now we're going to start from scratch. Now there's a couple film emulations that really work well and that are used in Hollywood. And I'll just show you here. Now, these are the Kodak Vision. You can see we've got 200T, that stands for tungsten lighting. Then we have 250D, that's daylight. Then again, we have Vision 3 500, that's tungsten. And so for this shot, we're going to do Kodak Vision 3 50D, that stands for daylight. So that's going to be the film that we choose. We're going to click Enabled, and you're going to see a bit of a difference right there. Now, we can adjust things from here. So we've got the push-pull, and you can see here if we go left, it has a bit of an effect. If we go right, it has a bit of an effect. I'm just going to double-click that and go back, leave it just like that. So the next step is film compression. Now, I'm just going to click on that, and we're going to see how it affects the waterfall. So I think that's too drastic, so we're going to bring that down to the left, the impact. I'm going to say, let's try that at about 10, and we'll toggle that, well, let's try 11. We'll toggle that on and off. So it's got a subtle impact. Let's bring it up to about 15. Okay. Now we have our white point and our tonal range. Let's adjust the white point first. Okay, so that really blows things out if I go to the left. I kind of like the way it was set by default. We're going to leave it there. Then we have our tonal range. You can see it gets brighter, and then it gets a little darker if I go that way. So I'll double click to go center. I think I'll just add a little touch of that, so maybe 50. And then we have our color density. You can see if I go left or if I go right, you can see the impact that has. Not totally drastic. I'm just going to leave that the way it is. Now let's click on the expand module. We're going to enable that. And it's always good to experiment and just see what looks good to you. And then it's really kind of what I like, maybe different than what you like. I kind of like the way that added a little contrast. So let's see where we started. We started at 0. I don't want to add too much. Let's probably go with, like, say, maybe a 2 on that one. And then our white point, we can play with that a bit. That brings in the brightness. That makes it darker. Let's double click where it started. I'd say let's go with like maybe a 98. And then we can always check the boxes to see the differences we've made. So let's go back and see what we've accomplished so far. Also, too, I should mention differencing. You should enable that. All right, so let's have a look at the first one, the film. So you can see how that changed that, but we can adjust the overall impact later on in the process. We have our film compression. You can see that in the highlights really well. Then we have our expand. You see it sort of added some contrast there. Now here's an interesting one too. We can also add Kodak 2383 print film, and we'll enable that, and we'll add the analog range limiter. So it's a little drastic, but we can still make some adjustments here. And like I said, we can adjust the overall look at the end of this. So let's just go and play with some of these controls here and see if we like either way. I kind of like, if we started off here, I kind of like it a little bit to the left. So just a touch there. Now, again, we can adjust our exposure. You can see that's kind of overkill. I'm going to start where it was. I think I'll just take it down just a notch. And then we've got our tonal contrast, and that makes it brighter. That makes it darker. I think that's a little bit much. Let's see. Okay. Then we have our color density. And that doesn't have a huge effect, so I'm going to leave that centered. You can see we have our saturation at 100%. Let's see what happens if we reduce that. So that takes all our color out. And also I checked analog range limiter. So we're going to leave that like that. Now we have some more color adjustments here with our color head. We'll enable that. And I'll just show you the differences here. We can add more yellow to the shot. So I like a little bit more yellow. And then we could add magenta or green. You can see there's the magenta, there's the green. I think just a touch of green there. And then you can see we have our cyan or our red. And I think that looks pretty good there. Now this is going to be pretty cool here because I like to cool down my shadows and I like to add some, say, orange to the highlights. So here you can see that if we take that, we're adding blue to the shadows. We don't want to go that far, but let's say almost 3 there. A little in the midtones, let's say 3. And then a little in the highlights, let's say 3. I'm making some subtle adjustments. Then we have preserve exposure. We also have impact, and then I could lower that impact as well. Because I'm going to make an adjustment at the very end, I'm going to leave that. Now here's film grain. Now this can be a little heavy-handed at times, so I'll enable this and then I'll show you what that looks like. So you can see we have a lot of film grain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the amount of the film grain. Also too, if that's too much, you can switch to positive. You can lower the film grain in the shadows, the midtones, the highlights. So what I'll do is I'll cut that in half. I'll take it down to about 25. And the same with the highlights. I'll take that down to about 25. And then I'll take this down to about 50 right there. And then also we have the chroma. That's going to be in the noise. I'm going to take that right down to about, let's say 18. So I've reduced the film grain quite a bit. And then you can see we also have different modes. I'm just going to leave it on analog. And then we have halation. So we'll see how this affects the image. And so you can see that added a bit of sort of, it looked a little like a yellowish kind of hue to me. And again, just play with this and see what you like. So what we can do is we can play with the local diffusion and go back and forth. And again, if you want to go back to what it was initially, the default, you just double click it. And then we have our global diffusion, which I like it better lower. So what was it at? It was 15. Maybe let's take that down to about 12. And then amplify. Let's see what that does to the footage. You can see a huge effect on there. So we'll go back to center. Then we have hue. You can see a huge effect there. And impact. Let's see what that does. I liked it probably about 70. All right, so that's pretty good. So now we're going to go to bloom. Now you should see this in the highlights. We're going to enable this. And then what we can do is just adjust the amount of that as well. And so I'm just going to leave the highlights at their default. And then the details, we'll have a look at that. Okay, I'm going to leave that at default as well. And then I'm going to leave, let's just try the impact. If we make it more impactful or less impactful. All right, I think it was a little bit too much. You can see the blooming on the sides of the waterfalls. I think that's a little bit too much. I think I'm going to go to about, let's say 30% there. Now, if you wanted to add a vignette, we can add a slight vignette to the image. So let's just see how we want to add that. So you can see how the vignette's really coming in there. That might be too severe. So by default, our vignette is there, and we can toggle that on and off. I think that's a little bit too much. So let's go, let's see. Take that up to there, and let's compare. Yeah, okay, so not so much. Maybe like a right about there, I think is good. Then we also have the size of the vignette. So that didn't have a huge impact. I'm going to leave that where that is. We're going to feather it. I think that's pretty good right there. And then I'm going to leave that and that alone. Now here's where you get to adjust if you think it's too much. So we can go all the way. So that was our original image. And now we're trying to give it more of a filmic look. Because sometimes with video, it's very sharp. The colors maybe aren't saturated the same way film would look. So now what we want to do is we just want to kind of bring in a little bit of this. I think it was a little too strong at 100%. You can see here we are around 54. Here we are at 100. So for my taste, I just like a little touch of this. So let's just see how this looks at maybe 20. We'll toggle it on and off. So, okay, I think it needs a little more. Let's bring it up to about maybe 30%. Toggle that on and off. And you can see it's sort of toned down some of those greens, sort of made the color palette a little more pleasing. And you can see it's just subtle, but it's really given it a unique look that we couldn't have probably got the same way. Anyway, if you have any comments or questions about Dehancer, you can ask them in the comment section below. If you want to learn more about Dehancer, I'll put a link just below this video in the description box. Click on that link and you can learn more about Dehancer. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. If you found any of these tips helpful, just hit that like button. Also, if you're not already a subscriber, I come up with new videos every week. Just hit that subscribe button, and then you'll be notified when the next video comes out. All right, thanks again for watching. It's quite good to hear. I hope you enjoyed this Dehancer tutorial. And like I said, to learn more about Dehancer, there's a link in the description box just below this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.